If you're relocating to Southwest Washington, you've probably heard of the beautiful town of Camas. And there are some things that everybody knows about this town, but in today's video, I'm going to talk about some things that nobody else is talking about. So if that's something you're interested in, stay tuned. Welcome back to Living in the Pacific Northwest with Hal Byrd. I'm Hal Byrd. I am a licensed realtor and broker in Southwest Washington and the Portland metro area. I'm licensed in both Oregon and Washington. And I make videos for people who are relocating because I was in your shoes just 5 short years ago, and there was no good content online about what it's like to live in this area. And this channel is dedicated to sharing with you things that aren't easily Googleable, things that I think that most people want to know when they're relocating. And if it's helpful to you, please make sure to subscribe. I would love to have you as part of this Living in the Pacific Northwest community. Make sure to like this video and leave a comment. Are you thinking about relocating to Camas? What are you most excited about, or what are your concerns? I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments. This is going to be a jam-packed video and maybe a little controversial, so let's jump right in. I have 8, maybe 9 things to share with you. I'm still on the fence about sharing number 9, so we'll see if it's in there at the end of the video. So the first thing to know, number 1 is higher prices. And if you're watching this video and you've been thinking about Camas, you might be saying, duh, Hal, everybody knows that Camas is more expensive. All you have to do is look on any real estate site. And yes, it is very easy to ascertain that the home prices in Camas are more expensive. Now, of course, we're starting off on houses because, like I said, I am a realtor and a certified relocation specialist. I help people from all over the country relocate to the Portland metro area. And I think that this is really important to know if you're considering Camas, because if you are going to purchase a home or you're going to be renting, the price of housing is going to be a major factor in your decision for 90% of people. So what they aren't telling you is that while everybody knows the home prices are higher, they won't exactly tell you how much. And what I found in my experience is that apples to apples, the same house in Vancouver versus Camas is going to be about $100,000 to $150,000 more expensive just by giving it a Camas address. So what I did to illustrate this point for you is I went into the MLS and I searched for homes that were 3 beds, 2.5 baths, around 2,000 square feet, that are on pretty decent sized lots ranging from 7 to 10,000 square feet, built in the mid-90s. That is a very typical home that you can find in Camas and in various neighborhoods in Vancouver. And what I found was this home in Vancouver that was originally listed at $530,000, and this home in Camas that is listed at $643,000. In that narrow search, there were not a lot of results. So I didn't cherry pick these or spend a lot of time trying to find things that looked super similar. I just ran that search, which is a very narrow targeted search for each town, and came up with these 2 examples. And it just so happens that the difference in price is $113,000 from the original list price. So you can see the stats of each home here, and you can see how incredibly similar they are. The Vancouver house was built in 1992 and is 2,102 square feet and is on a lot size that is around 7,800 square feet. And then we go over to the Camas house. This house was built in 1996, is 2,252 square feet, and has a lot size of just over 8,200 square feet. So these are, I would say, very typical homes that are desirable to the average person, where you're getting a decent sized backyard and, 3 bed. I even bumped it up a little, 2.5 bath. I know a lot of people really like to have that extra half bath. And you'll find this at every price point. So whether you are looking at condos, whether you're looking at median average homes, or you're looking at townhomes or luxury homes, you will see this across most of the price points here. But here's a curveball. maybe Camas isn't more expensive than everywhere else. And this is one of those perspectives that other people just aren't talking about. What if living in Camas actually saved you money? But how can I do that when I'm spending $100,000+ more for the exact same home? Here's how. For families who are thinking about sending their kids to private school, some might consider Camas and say, well, if I'm not going to send my kids to private school and outlay that amount of money every year, which the average price point for private school in Vancouver is $15,000 a year, then I can afford to spend more money on my house. So in both of my clients' situations, they had 2 young kids, different ages. They both ended up on Prune Hill. Both of their kids go to Dorothy Fox Elementary School. And if they were to send both of their children K through 12 through private school, you'd be looking at a bill in the several $100,000 range. So you could easily be spending hundreds of thousands on private school education. Or what some families might do is decide to live in Camas, pay about $100,000 more for the price of the home, but be able to send their kids to public school. And the wrinkle to me here is that if you had 2 kids, sending them through the private school route, you'd spend $360,000. And yes, that's an investment in your child's education, but the money that you're spending doesn't appreciate. If anything, over time, the prices of public school are going to go up, not down. Whereas if you spend that extra money towards the house and you're buying a house that's $100,000 to $150,000 more expensive, but hopefully over the course that your children are in school, we're talking about 12 to 15 years, that house would hopefully appreciate, and the amount that you paid extra compared to other areas or compared directly to Vancouver would actually be a savings if your house appreciated over time. And let's just pretend and take appreciation completely off the table. Even just on the dollar amounts, you spend $150,000 more, but you're gonna save $300,000, you're gonna come out ahead. And that is how buying in Camas could potentially be a savings of several $100,000, even though the home prices themselves are more expensive. That brings us to number 2, the next thing that people aren't talking about and won't tell you when it comes to living in Camas is about status, and I'm talking about social status. It might not be the most polite thing to say if you live there, but there is a certain social status attached with living in Camas. And it's not that different than other areas. I'm sure that every area in the country has an area that is considered more affluent, more of a status symbol if you live there. Think Manhattan or Beverly Hills or Bel Air. Everybody knows those cities and associates them with status and wealth. And let's bring it closer to home. Let's talk about Portland. What area in Portland is considered to be the most affluent, the wealthiest area on the Oregon side in the Portland area? Everybody knows it's Lake Oswego. That's where NBA players live, and CEOs, and people who have some of the nicest homes around. Just look up Lake Oswego real estate and you will see why it is considered to be such a prestigious city to live in. And so I want you to think about what Lake Oswego is to Portland. Camas is that to Southwest Washington. So if you do live in Camas, there is a bit of status symbol, status boost that comes with living here. And that might be a little controversial to say, but I told you that I was going to talk about things that nobody else is talking about, and that's one of them. Now, don't take this to mean that the people that live in Camas are snobby, conceited, arrogant, full of themselves, materialistic. That could not be further from the case. I find that the people that I meet who live in Camas, my clients who have helped relocate there, are some of the nicest, most down-to-earth, laid back people that you will meet, but there is this unavoidable stigma attached to living in Camas. And this is evidenced by census data. So the fact of the matter is that the median household income in Camas is almost double what it is in Vancouver. Vancouver is $67,000, Camas is $121,000. So now we're at number 3, and this one is kind of an interesting one. We're going to talk about schools. And you're like, Hal, everybody talks about Camas schools. That's one of the first things that come up if you Google what it's like to live in Camas, or is Camas a good place to live, or any of the things that you can Google about Camas. The schools are something that comes up often. And I'm going to put another twist on this, and again, something that no one is talking about. And that is a few things. I think that the conversation stops a little short when you just say that, oh, Camas has good schools, because it glosses over some things that I personally think are either issues or concerns or just things to be aware of, because there's no perfect school in this entire country, but Camas consistently ranks as a top school in the state and in the metro area. It's in the top 10 best high schools according to niche.com in the Portland metro area, putting it right up there with Lake Oswego and Westland. So while the school ratings are very high, and you can see some of the school ratings here, it is not without its challenges. And the first I would say is what I've heard from people who have kids in the school district in Camas. And it kind of ties into number 2, which is social status. Because of that higher social status, I've heard the experience that some kids in the school feel like the more money you or your family has, the higher social status you have in high school. In that way, there's kind of a status within the status. And kids can be mean and cruel and awful, and high school can be a very difficult time for kids. So having your popularity tied to how much money your family has can be a challenge and isn't necessarily the greatest thing. And I heard this said before, that even within the different schools in Camas, so there's only one high school in the Camas school district, there's a few middle schools and then several elementary schools. And in speaking about the elementary schools, I've heard it said, again, not PC, not kind, but I had overheard someone say that there are schools for the haves and the have-nots. And that is awful, and it's not a pretty thing to think about. And I told you that this video is gonna be controversial and these topics are not comfortable to speak about, but it is worth knowing. And again, I'm not saying Camas isn't a great place to live. I'm not saying the schools aren't great, but these are some things if you put your kids in that school system, they may experience. And going back to the point of this video, this is something no one is talking about. And I don't always like to be the one to bring these things to you, but I think one of the things that I wanted to do, and my husband and I wanted to do when we set out to make this channel, was to give an accurate portrayal of the area. And we do that to the best of our ability. And so it's making me uncomfortable even talking about it. And it's also gonna get more uncomfortable as we talk about schools, because the next thing that has come up, again, going back to kids can be mean and cruel, there have been 2 ugly incidents that happened at Camas High School that revolve around race and were specifically at sport games where there were racial slurs allegedly yelled during the game. And there's articles about it. So if you want to read about it, I would encourage you to Google it, read the articles. One had to do with a high school in Portland and one had to do with Skyview High School when those 2 high schools went to Camas and the experience of the players on the opposing teams. So I wouldn't say that it was necessarily a surprise, but if you've ever watched our video about race in Washington, and really applies to race across this country, there's very little that surprises me, unfortunately. And so it wasn't a surprise, but it's also not reflective of my personal experience in Camas. Personally, I've never experienced any sort of overt racism or microaggressions when it comes to being in Camas. Everyone that I've dealt with in Camas, I've had nothing but good experiences in Camas. And I've sold a lot of homes there. I was one of the top agents that sold in Camas last year. So I'm over there quite a bit and interact with people and neighbors and businesses, and it hasn't really been an issue for myself or my husband, but it is worth bringing up because again, nobody's talking about it. People want to paint a perfect picture about every town that they talk about, especially on a realtor's channel. And I just want to be 100% real and upfront with you, especially if you're considering putting your kids in there. I think you deserve to know. You may choose to still put your kids in that school, but at least you are informed and you're not finding out after the fact. And the last thing I want to touch on about schools is that if you are wanting to put your kids in Camas schools, it is worth knowing that there is a small section of town that is east of Crown Road where you have a Washougal address, but you are districted to Camas schools. That doesn't mean that you're gonna save any money, because two of the biggest subdivisions over there are Lookout Ridge and Northside, which are really beautiful. Northside is a beautiful new construction community. Lookout Ridge is a little bit more established, but it's on a hill, and you can have great views of the Columbia River. So if you kind of wanna be a little bit closer to the gorge, kind of on that Washougal Camas border, and you want Camas schools, that's kind of a sweet spot to look at. So reach out to me if that's something you're interested in. And the fourth thing that nobody else is talking about is a little bit of a lighter topic, which is shopping. 95% of your amenities and shopping are going to be in one of two places. One is in Vancouver, specifically on the Vancouver-Camas border, which is along Southeast 192nd. That's where you'll have Costco, Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, Natural Grocers, QFC, various different restaurants, Starbucks, and the really exciting new development that's going on at Columbia Palisades, which is at the very bottom of 192nd and Highway 14. So you're gonna be going into Vancouver, but specifically on the east side of Vancouver, west side of Camas quite a bit. The other place you might go to is downtown Camas. Downtown Camas is very cute. It's a beautiful downtown area that I think they do a great job preserving the historic small town charm of it. The only thing that's really there amenity wise in terms of like grocery stores is the Safeway. So that's the only grocery store that's down there. There are several little small shops, there's art galleries and restaurants. So you're either gonna be going into Vancouver or you're gonna be going to downtown Camas. Now, if you live on Prune Hill, that's great because you're situated right in between those two areas. But as you go into more rural Camas, so if you're going north and east, or if you go more towards the Washougal border, you're gonna be traveling a little bit farther. Most of my clients who live on Prune Hill, for instance, are 5 minutes from Costco, whereas if you live in a rural part of Camas, you're gonna be 15 to 20 minutes from Costco. So if you're dead set on living rurally and you want the Camas schools, rural Camas is a great place. And it's still relatively convenient. It's not like you're gonna be an hour away from suburban amenities. But it's good to know that there's really only two places you're gonna be going when it comes to shopping and amenities. Now, the fifth thing that no one's talking about when it comes to Camas, Washington is the smell. I've had people call me and text me and say, hey Hal, I heard that Camas stinks because of the paper mill, or I've heard that there's a paper mill in Camas. Does it stink? Does it smell? And the answer is, it used to, but it doesn't anymore. So this would be a great time to have a little history lesson and go back in time. So let's talk about the mill's history. In 1883, Henry Piddock's Lacamas Colony Company bought 2,600 acres to bring a paper mill to supply newsprint for the Oregonian. In 1885, the mill began producing wood pulp, and this is the kind of paper production that smells. The smell is what's been described as sulfurous, like rotten eggs or rotten cabbage. And this smell can travel for as much as 10 miles, even sometimes up to 30 miles, depending on the wind. So a lot of people who are locals, especially Portland natives, think of Camas as being this smelly town. I even heard that you could smell Camas as you were coming over the bridge into Vancouver. It has this past of being a paper mill town, and that was the industry for the town. That was what generated most of the revenue for the city. Keep in mind that Camas High School, the mascot is the paper makers. So that just is a nod to the history of Camas. So we can see that in 1914, Crown Columbia merged with Willamette Paper to form Crown Willamette Paper Company. And then there was another merger with Zellerbach Paper, and the mill stopped making newsprint in 1930 and began producing specialty paper. And then to support the war effort in 1941, machine shops were converted to manufacture shipyard parts. Fast forward 30 years to 1971, the Crown Zellerbacher, the mill, was the county's biggest manufacturing employer with 2,600 workers. And lots of changing hands happened over the years. In 2000, Georgia Pacific acquired what was then the current company there, which was the Fort James Corporation. And you can see that in 2017, the mill had Clark County's biggest property tax bill of $1.77 million. It's a lot of revenue to lose. In 2018, they began to shut down the mill. So let's jump back to present time, and keep talking about what you need to know that they're not telling you about Camas, Washington. So to wrap up number 5, no, it does not smell anymore, but I have gotten questions about that, and hopefully this answers everyone's question once and for all. Number 6. So let's talk about the 6th thing that nobody's talking about when it comes to Camas, Washington, and they're not going to put on the brochure. And that has to do with politics. We live in a society that can be very charged politically, and I think it's worth noting what the political makeup is when it comes to the city, because if it's not important to you, then it doesn't matter where you live. You could live in a very conservative town, you could live in a very liberal town, if politics aren't that important to you. But I find that most people, politics falls somewhere on the scale of importance. For some, it's the number 1 most important thing. Hello to my Texas viewers who keep telling me that they're getting out of Texas because of the politics. That is the number 1 reason I hear for people relocating from Texas as to why they're moving to Washington State. Camas is not quite as blue as Vancouver, and if you've been watching this channel for a while, you'll know that I talk about our area being very purple. And it is. I would say that the more central you are in Vancouver, the bluer it is, but it's not overwhelmingly blue, and I'll show you what I mean on this map. So you can see that the most blue areas are the most central parts of Portland. And as you move north and outside into the suburbs of Portland, it starts to get lighter blue. And then parts of Vancouver, I guess, are like medium blue to light blue, which when we're talking about the 2020 election and what that resulted in, it could be, you know, a +10 for Biden. It really varies based on how many people live in the area, but like +8. So as we look at Camas, you can see that Camas is mostly light blue with a couple of pockets of red and then light red in the rural areas of Camas. So politically, this is probably one of the most balanced areas in Clark County. So not as blue as Vancouver, but not as conservative as the rural areas. If you are coming from a very liberal city, this might be a little bit of a culture shock politically. For some, it might be the neutrality and the balance that you're looking for. One of the things to note here that a lot of people won't tell you, which is kind of nice when things have been so heated over the last few years, is that politics will rarely come up in conversation with your neighbors. And yes, we speak to our neighbors. This is a very neighborly area. It's a very friendly area. You will know your neighbors. Your neighbors will introduce themselves. You will know things about them, but you probably won't know their political views. And it's kind of nice to just have neighbors and not have to wonder about their politics. And maybe you end up talking politics with them, and that's your choice, but it usually won't come up in conversation. I have zero idea what my neighbors' political beliefs are, but they bring me their fresh eggs from their chickens. They bring cherries from their family's farms. So it's a very neighborly place, but politics is definitely not a topic of conversation with neighbors. And in today's climate, that's a very refreshing, light, pleasant thing to experience in this climate that is sometimes very frustrating. All right, we are on to number 7. And we are on to the 7th thing that people will not tell you when it comes to living in Vancouver, Washington, and that is that there's not a lot of indoor activities in the winter, which can be important if you have kids. If you're a homebody like we are, then it's great. You love the winter, you love all the seasons. But if you live in Camas, there's not as many indoor activities to do with kids over the winter season. Camas is really great for outdoors and trails and hikes and proximity to all sorts of things. Camas is a great place if you like to be outdoorsy. As a matter of fact, Camas is right next to Washougal, which is affectionately known as the gateway to the gorge, which is access to dozens and dozens of hikes that will keep you busy for many, many years to come. And you don't have to stop those activities in the winter. One of the nice things about our PNW mist that we have is that it doesn't stop you from doing outdoors activities. But if you do want indoor activities and you live in Camas, the options are slim to none. Whereas if you look at Vancouver, Vancouver has 4 bowling alleys. They have an indoor soccer arena that kids can go play at in Salmon Creek. And they also have several indoor play gym things like the Kids Club Fun and Fitness. So there's just more indoor activities to do in Vancouver. So you can drive to them, but in Camas, you're just not gonna find a lot to do in the winter when it comes to kids. Okay, so now we are at the 8th thing that people won't tell you when it comes to living in Camas, and that is that there is a drug detox center and alcohol rehabilitation center on Prune Hill that is very close to Dorothy Fox Elementary School and the park there. This was hotly contested by the residents in Camas. There were several signs around town that said no drug detox next to Dorothy Fox. And a lot of people won't talk about this, but there was a lawsuit that was filed and the citizens lost the lawsuit and the rehabilitation center is allowed to exist. Now the city of Camas, after that fiasco, because it was a big deal, they have put in place a regulation that requires at least 1,000 feet of distance from parks and schools for any sort of rehabilitation center. But the one that this big fight was over does exist and is there right now. And I'd love to hear in the comments, do you think that that's went far enough? Do you think that the city did everything they could do to prevent this, given how vocal the citizens were about not wanting to have an alcohol and drug rehabilitation center so close to the school? So what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments. All right, and we made it to the number 9 thing that people will not tell you when it comes to living in Camas, Washington.
That is except for Hal Byrd.
Except for me. And that is that you'll probably run into a lot of transplants. So if you're worried about there being tons of people who are born and raised in Washington, or my family's been here for 15 generations or whatever, not including the native people, that's not the case. You're gonna run into a lot of transplants. And I think it has to do with the fact that like attracts like. So when people are relocating here and they're thinking about where to live, a lot of people wanna know what are the best neighborhoods. And no matter where you search, whether you look on YouTube or you ask in a Facebook group or different online forums or you read blogs, a lot of places will come up and say, well, Camas is one of the best places to live in Southwest Washington. And so because of that, a lot of people from out of the area gravitate towards Camas. And that really has to do with the reputation. Camas has a really good reputation. It's known as a place that is a small town, but growing, that is community oriented, that is family friendly, that is great for retirees because you have obviously tax-free living in Washington, and you can have the activities that you want to live a full life in Portland if you want to go to concerts and events and travel to be so close to the airport, within 15 to 20 minutes of the airport. So that's something that people won't tell you, but you will find a lot of transplants in Camas, and a lot of those transplants are clients that I've helped relocate and are incredibly happy here. You can actually watch an interview that I did with a couple who relocated from Texas to Camas, Washington, right here. So I hope this video was helpful, enlightening, and maybe a bit surprising. I think we really went there on this video, and I didn't hold anything back. I gave you the good, the bad, and the ugly, maybe some things that were unexpected, but I really wanted to deliver on the promise and make this video not clickbait. So these are things that I'm 90% sure, 99% that you haven't heard of. So if you want to work with a realtor in your relocation who is going to share the things that you can't Google, who is going to get to know you and your situation and be able to say, which I say to a lot of clients, hey, I don't think you're gonna be happy in this house long term. Here's another house that I think you would be more happy in. And that comes down to knowing what your desires are, what your criteria is, and being okay telling you, hey, I think we can do better. I know that you want to stay within this price range. I know that you want to have a 3-bed, 2.5-bath home that's on at least 7,000 square feet, like the example earlier. Let's not settle for the 3-bed, 2-bath that has less backyard space than you were hoping for. So if you want to work with someone like that, who's going to tell you those things and give you honest feedback and be a true ally and partner with you in your relocation journey, then I would be honored to work with you. So if you're thinking about relocating to the Pacific Northwest, make sure to shoot me a text. You can also book a Zoom with me in the description below. I'd be happy to help you in any way that I can. Make sure you go follow me on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, whatever your preferred platform is. And if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed, like this video, and drop me a comment. I love hearing from you guys. Talk to you soon. Ciao.